I think. Let's have a look.
I have a compilation somewhere on my bookshelf. Just one of his best works.
I was surprised to hear they do different ages as well. They do a Dark Age Call of Cthulhu and an Ancients one, an Egyptian one. I think even said it was like a science fiction one, Pope Cthulhu or something.
That's another one.
Yeah.
1930s, 40s thing.
Yeah. That's the one I saw. I think ours was like a 20s and 30s thing, or maybe even 40s, 1940s type of era.
That would be fun. You got the Nazis running around.
I remember there was another game with something like that. It was Call of Cthulhu, and there was some sort of Nazi thing. What was that? Was that a film or was it a book?
There's a bunch of them that made by different companies. There's one called Tongue Cthulhu. There's that one, which is all based around World War II and post-World War II. There's World War Cthulhu, which is another one, same kind of premise. And Chaosium, they make a pulp Cthulhu, which is based around that Indiana Jones type of thing, and pulp. And the original setting, of course, if you're not in the know, is the 1920s and 30s. That's the original setting in his writings.
Yeah, that's what I'd like, I think.
There's a turn of the century one, Victorian era Cthulhu. I don't know. I think Chaosium also does something for that as well. And yeah, there's Osprey puts out a book that's very Cthulhu-esque, based in Rome.
Yeah,
it's a miniatures game.
Oh yeah, that was. Oh, I know the one you're on about. Yeah. I very nearly got that.
And Game of the Rome or something.
No,
I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're. I very nearly got that one because I ended up buying Poseidon's the naval one for Osprey. The Ancient's naval one I ended up buying.
Yeah, I got that too.
Yeah. Poseidon's Heroes or something? I don't know. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's Poseidon's Heroes is very simple. A little bit too simple, and it's big fleet battles.
Yeah, because I got a box full of Zeistung metal castings of galleys and triremes and quinteremes and all sorts. It was given to me by a friend. I just have a shoebox full of these ships.
Are they the big scale ones? 1/200, 1/300, something like that?
I think they're 1/1300? They're quite big. Yeah, they're about 2.5, maybe even 3 inches long.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I'd love to make my own ships. I'd love that.
Yeah. I think you should be able to do that. Get the basic. I don't know what you would put out of wood.
But you could use a mounting board, card. You could use balsa wood would be perfect.
Balsa, yeah, that would be the best.
It would be easy. Just do some research, look at other companies' models, and pick a scale where you got 1 inch equals so many feet or 1 millimeter equals so many feet. Base it on that, draw your plans, cut them out, find a way to piece them together that looks right. Like, are the oars down in the water? Are they raised? Are they, in battle, they take the masts down, so you don't have to worry about none of that. Yeah, that's all you'd have to do. I know this because I used to make my own way back in the day. And these ships were made out of cardboard, and they were 6 inches long. And I could literally take the oars sections out of the models or put them back. And it was they lost them. And it was designed for 15 millimeter figures to show Marines and crew for archeries and stuff, and you can put towers on them. And can't remember the name of the rules. Sea Battles in Miniature it was called. It's long out of print, but it's a classic, and I think it's one of the reasons why I love naval wargaming. That book back then covered everything from ancients to wooden ships to World War ACW and the different types of ships that was being made, to World War I, World War II, medieval. It covered all of it. And each period was a separate chapter, basically. And he gave you the rules. He gave you a brief historical background. He gave you an example of play of a full battle. Man, I love that. And I made these little ships, and I went through each chapter and made cardboard ships for Napoleonic ships, ancients. I did World War I with my old plastic toy ships, which were only about that big. I still have them. I used it for that. I had a blast with that game. And it's called Sea Battles and Miniatures. You can still find it if you look hard enough. Great game. I still have a burned up copy of it. Survived the fire.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And I made them out of corrugated card. Top-down views. The ancient ships are really nice because they were three-dimensional. They weren't just a top-down, here's a piece of cardboard with stuff drawn on. I actually made it. I might even still have them up in the attic.
Yeah. I'm sure you'd be able to get plans for building model ships.
Who?
I'm sure you'd be able to get plans for building new ones online.
Yeah.
Just download the plans and...
There's a company that sells cardboard printout sheets that you can build the ships out of card. All the ships, and then it comes with rules and everything. I can't think of the name of the manufacturer.
No.
But they make all that stuff as paper ships. You print them out and you put them together the way they instruct you, and you have this galley, you know. Go on. Hope you guys are enjoying the paint and chat today. We're doing a lot of talking. I didn't paint anything, but I'm going to show you guys some miniatures anyway. Let's get another look at these handsome young fellows.
Yeah.
I got my glasses off, so I can't tell if it's in focus.
No, it was all right. I got a question.
What?
Well, most of the figures I've painted for the ACW are in marching pose, and it's just one of those things that popped into my head the other night. Now I've got about 1,600 just about painted in marching pose, and I was thinking, looking at watching not Games of Thrones, what am I on about? Gods and Generals in Gettysburg and all that. When they actually get to the fighting, you have getting some figures in firing pose. I don't know, just carry on doing it in marching pose, or would it look a bit more realistic with a load of regiments painted up in firing pose as well?
What, in 10 mil?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Because then I don't know.
It was just one of those silly questions that sort of just plopped in my head one night.
Well, I mean, I've done my 6 mil ACW, and all of them are they're in the map. Well, they've got the musket under their armpit, and they've got their arm across the chest.
Yeah.
In the carry position, and they're all like that. And you can't. I mean, I've got different ones. I've got skirmishers, which are in firing poses, but they're separate. I don't put that. I could have put some of them among the ranks, I suppose, but to me, it's then they look silly. Then if you're like in column formation and they're shooting the block in front.
That's what I was thinking. It does look silly. I was just thinking, well, if I've got most of the army painted in marching pose, any sort of photography I do of them marching around the battlefield or to a battlefield I can use those figures. But when they're actually being photographed fighting, have them in the firing pose.
Well, you could, but you're going to double your work, aren't you? Because you're going to have to have duplicates.
I know that's the thing that was going through my head.
Because I just cover them in bloody cotton wool, and then the firing, and I think people accept that. People are war gamers. They know you can't. It's not a computer game. You can't get them from marching to fixing bayonets and ramming rods down the barrel and then taking aim and shooting. We just can't do that. You've got to go for a pause.
And then you'd have charging pose as well.
Yeah, I mean, different in 28, because in 28 you can get away with it all on one stand. You can have some loading, you can have some shooting, you can have the ones at the back still with the arms on the shoulder, and you can have casualties all mixed in amongst them, and they look great. But when you get down to 10 and 6, I don't know. I don't think I would go that far, that route.
It's just I did a regiment of Union and Confederate cavalry, and I had the dismounted troopers in firing pose, and I thought, well, yeah, that looks sort of quite nice. But,
my dismounted cavalry are in firing pose.
Yeah, so maybe just leave it at that, I think.
Yeah,
because I'm going to get too detailed, I think, if I carry on like this.
Yeah. Well, the regiment's either doing one thing. It's either lining up to shoot, or it's bloody marching, isn't it? Or it's stood.
Yeah.
Tends to be. You don't get every third bloke pointing his musket and firing, and bloke next to him still got his arm shouldered. It looks stupid. It looks silly. Why's he doing that? I don't know. It's like the 172nd days when you got so many kneeling down shooting and so many standing up shooting, and you tended to keep them all together. You kept the marching ones together, and you got to give and take. You've got a lot of it's got to be down to your imagination. The viewer has got to use a bit of his imagination. You're putting the troops down there. You're putting clouds of smoke. The fact that they've got the rifles across the chest or what have you is that they accept that. Yeah, they're firing. We know it's metal figures or it's plastic figures. They're not going to alter position.
Got a big battle planned with Ian and Nick, planning a big giant battle, right, Nick?
Yeah, we should all together if you're a freaker. But yes, I want to kick some English butt.
What rules are you going to use? What rules?
I think because this battle is going to be huge, because now I reunited my armies, and we're talking about 3,000 figures, and all these other rule sets. It takes hours and hours. I think we're going to use Hail Caesar. Ian has been brushing up a bit his knowledge in the rules. It's a fast set of rules. It can move quickly, and you can go quite fast into hand-to-hand combat. It's fairly, I don't know if you can say historically correct, but it's fairly good. I played with them quite a bit the last few months, and you have dice for support, you have dice for quality. It's a good, fast-paced, fun set of rules. If you don't want to be very picky about it. So for very large battles, that this one is going to be, because I've reunited the armies and they're actually huge. I think it would be they fit the concept,
Yeah. Just make sure all the archers have got full quivers, because they didn't have quivers in them days, did they? Just make sure they've all got a full oilcloth full of quivers, oil of arrows, so making clean pushings over them French knives.
Actually, the two online battles we fought, you won both. You won Agincourt. I think Shrewsbury was you won by very, very small margin, but you won also, correct? Or I don't remember well.
Yeah, that's right.
I
Yeah,
think.
I'm 2-0 up at the minute, so I'm due for a defeat.
Yeah, I lost Shrewsbury. I lost Shrewsbury very close, but I lost Shrewsbury, I remember.
And that's Agincourt one was unusual for the English to win, because normally the French win, don't they?
Yes, but we played Agincourt very historically correct. We had the French going very slow at up to a point because of the mud they were using. You remember they were using half distance, and we did it quite well. And and you remember, in the end, because of the large numbers I had, you remember if on your left flank the French were winning and they were ready to, but in the center, you won the center with King Henry, and then you overlapped the French and you flanked them. But at the point, you remember we were talking about it, we were discussing, it was very close at a point.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It could have gone either way. It was very close at the end. But defeating the French right wing right from the beginning, that was a big advantage.
Yeah, you remember? Yes, you routed the militia and they left the right flanking knights very fast, and the center was very strongly hold. And yes, it was a good battle. It was a good battle. It was fun.
Yeah, well, you see if you can get your revenge in the next one.
Yes, we need to say. I don't know. This one is not going to be historical, correct? We're going to make it like.
Just make up a scenario. Just the French trying to stop the English getting through to Calais or something.
Yeah, something like this. Or the English defending or being blocked by the French as usual and defending a superior position with less troops. This is what we usually do.
Yeah, it won't matter. The boys once got their arrows in the air, it'll all be over.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I was reading in this book, and actually it was in my one of my series with the games that I have. I was reading that usually in the medieval battles, in the 100 Years' War battles, after the 5th or the 6th barrage of arrows, the sides knew who will win. It was obvious. That's very interesting when I read it.
Well, that also the first time, although they didn't know it at the time, it was biological warfare, because the English archers would crap on the ground and stick their arrows in it.
Yeah, true.
And then when they fired them, of course, even if it was just a flesh wound, because of that on it, eventually it would cause septicemia. And I mean, you wouldn't kill them straight away on the battlefield, but within a week, there would be lots more casualties who would die because of septicemia, blood poisoning. So it was an early form, even though they didn't really know what was going on in the body. They knew that if the arrows were contaminated, it would eventually, it would eventually kill the person.
Yeah, true. But it's amazing how a weapon changes history in a way. I mean, it was obvious that there were many parameters, but it was obvious that the longbow was and the weight was used by the English was a great advantage, and it turned the tides of the war. And then again, the great use of gunpowder and cannons that was apparently, obviously, the French were superior than the English during the latter stage of the 100 Years' War, turned again the tides, and and the war for a French victory. So it's strange that, I mean, it's not just strange. It's interesting to see that a type of weapon, of course, with other parameters for sure, French stupidity in strategy or English superior strategy or whatever, plays so important in influencing a war like this, or any war, I can imagine.
Yeah, but I can see the English point. They've got something that's winning battles. It's easy to do. It's cheap. It's winning, this newfangled gunpowder rubbish comes along. No, it's just a fad, it'll die out. So they don't follow it up, they stick to the good old trusted and tried method. But of course, eventually the gunpowder caught up and eventually outclassed them.
Yeah, and yes, but it's in the end, you know what surprises me is that the French had longbows as well, but they were not effective at all. As I'm sure the English had gunpowder and cannons in the end as well, but it seems that the French were superior. So it's also the way that the armies use it. I mean, the French had longbowmen. They knew how the English were using them, maybe, but the French longbows or the French archers had no effect. They were not even mentioned in any battle, although they were part of. And I'm sure the English had gunpowder in the end of the war. So it is also you know, in the way that each country utilized the weapon, and you know, maybe it was their knowledge and the way they use this weapon that changed the tides of the war. I mean, both sides had gunpowder, both sides had longbows, but for sure the English used them better.
Yeah, I think the way of using them in massed ranks, which we used to do with interspaced with men at arms, rather than split up in little hodgepodge groups, all the English tended to concentrate, didn't they? And so whoever's at the receiving end of that concentration paid the price. Where the French tended to spread them about a bit, plus they stuck to the crossbow long after they should have given up on it. I know it was a powerful weapon and it was accurate, but it took so bloody long to load. I mean, a good archer could get off 10 arrows in the time it took him to load one bolt.
Yeah, for sure. But it was also, as we discussed many times, the mentality. I mean, at that point, the English had professional armies. They were one step ahead of the French. The French still were having this feudal system based on nobility, and the nobles were fighting for honor and were fighting to attack and to kill other English nobles. But the English at that time, I can say from Crecy onwards, they were fielding professional armies, not based in nobility. So I think that's where cutthroats, the longbowmen who were basically outlaws, tough guys who had nothing to lose. So I think that's where the tide turned for the English at that time.
Plus, of course, when you're in France, you've got nowhere to go. If you lose, you're going to die. So that's a pretty good incentive to keep on fighting, because victory is the only way you're going to get back home. If you lose, the French are going to chase you down in your small pockets wherever you leg it to, and you're going to be killed anyway. So it was a good incentive to just keep going, because as soon as you broke, that would be it. The French could break because they were in their own country. They could get away, and the English aren't likely to chase after them. But the other way around, it was curtains really. So you've got to keep going.
True. But I think that the English fielded also totally different armies than the French at that time. The English were professionals, they were armies, they were standing armies. They were not like, a bunch of nobles who were meeting together to attack for honor and glory. They were professional people who were experienced and training. And I think that showed in all the major battles up to the end. I believe.
Yeah, and in England, of course, they had to. The archers had to prove that they could do the job. They had to prove their accuracy, prove that they had the job, and the nobles who recruited them had to provide them with all their equipment.
Yeah, true.
And so they tended to be more professional in that respect. Right, I'm going to have to just hold on a bit, gents. The doorbell's gone again.
Sorry, going. Sorry, Kid. We just got into this 100 Years' War again. Sorry about this.
No, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Actually, I'll tell you something.
We're still live, so it's
okay.
interesting for anyone who watches this later too.
I tell you something about this. It's very funny, but the success that the English had, because I read many books on this, the success the English had during the 100 Years' War was what Ian was saying before, the mixture of men-at-arms on foot and missile troops. And so basically, Edward III dismounted his men-at-arms. The first time he did it was in Halidon Hill against the Scots. But I have to say that basically the English, these successful tactics were a copy-paste of the way the Scots were fighting. The Scots were always fighting on foot, and they were always, they inflicted great defeats against the English, during the Scottish Wars of Independence, where the English were still fighting with heavy cavalry. So basically, the English successful strategy during the 100 Years' War came from copying the Scots, who was fighting always dismounted with very limited mounted units. And the first time that this happened, as I told you, was in Halidon Hill, where Edward III dismounted his men-at-arms against the Scots. And then this continued during the 100 Years' War. So it's strange how, armies copied from each other and maybe took then a step forward, the strategy, and became successful. But this was a copy-paste of Scottish strategy, basically.
No, I never knew that.
Yeah. The Scots were always fighting on foot. I mean, they didn't have many knights anyway, but they always. In Stamford Bridge and in Bannockburn, where the English were annihilated, the Scots, with the Siltrons and the pikes, the Scots were fighting on foot. But then afterwards, the English developed the longbows, so they didn't have to go close to the Scotch spikes, who were deadly. So they were, killing the Scots from far away. And that's very interesting how how strategies developed. You see, good generals see their opponents. I mean, of course, you need to lose a battle to learn. And so the English were annihilated by attacking the Scottish spikes. Then they developed the longbows. Then basically the Scottish spikes were nullified because they were very slow, and the longbows could pick them from far away and destroy them, break them, and then the English men-at-arms riding from the flanks and destroying them. But you see how things develop, and how generals and armies learn from their defeats, and how they copy a strategy from somebody else, and then they take it a step forward and then a step forward, and it's becoming successful because if you consider the 100 Years' War, okay, the French won at the end, and they were victorious, but most of the major battles and most of the famous pitched battles, and if we check it in the longevity of the years, the English were more successful. I mean, in the end, of course, they lost. But it's an interesting period. It's a period I like very much. I know that not many people follow it from wargaming, although quite a few. But it's a very interesting period for me. It's a combination of strategy and and nobility, and you have great warriors and heroes fighting in the front and leading from the front, not from the back. This is something that really excites me, or I enjoy. Seeing, for example, the blind king of Bohemia asking his man in the Battle of Crecy to take him close to the English so he can strike a blow. And he was blind, and he was annihilated from the English. But I don't know, these things really inspire me. And, I think humanity is going downwards since then. We're becoming worse and worse and worse and worse than these guys who, were very honorable and courageous, and they were fighting for country. And I don't know. This period excites me. I think it's a very interesting period. I mean, any war between England and France, in all eras, Napoleonic era and 100 Years' War, it's these two superpowers. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Why did the French never? I mean, Agincourt. I mean, with what the longbow did to them, how come they didn't realize that what would happen to them if, like in previous battles, that the English were using the longbow like they did?
Yeah, that's strange. I mean, I will tell you something. If you read the battles and what actually happened, you would realize that most of the time the French lost than you could say the English won. I'll tell you what happened at that time. The size of the French army was their downfall. The armies were very large, were huge. They could not be controlled. The areas were not that big to accommodate big armies, and you had the stepping over, the panic effect, the funneling effect that you have, and I think from quite a few books I've read on strategy that except that the French still had, as I was saying before with Ian, they were based on feudal armies up to almost the end of the 100 Years' War. The nobles were the ones who wanted to fight in the front. They were pushing the militia in the back. They wanted to have the honor. There was a bit of anarchy in the French armies. The commanders of the French army, for example, in Agincourt, Charles d'Albert and Marshal Boucicaut, these were the Constable of France, and the other one was the general, so they was responsible for the army. Although they were the responsible of the army, the nobles that were part of the army were of higher class and higher quality, supposedly, as nobles, and their orders were never followed. Their orders were not to fight and wait and starve the English. So the anarchy of the French army, the lack of a professional army, as I was saying before with Ian, that the English had, was their downfall, because they made the wrong decisions. For example, at Agincourt, they dismounted because they knew that the English dismounted successfully. So they dismounted. But what happened? There were too many. There was rain before. Imagine wearing heavy armor, or even chainmail, and walking or like marching through mud in the French fields under arrow fire, and then when you have 10,000 people, someone will fall, then somebody will fall over him. The terrain is not wide enough to accommodate so many men. People start panicking. So in many battles, and if Ian comes back, we can debate on this, and he can tell us his opinion. In many battles, I would say, although I'm an English, let's say, fan of the English strategy, and I like the way the English fought, I believe that the French lost because the French were not organized, didn't have command structure. The nobles were feuding between each other, and this was portrayed on the battlefield, and it created, a panic, and especially, when you have very large armies and the peasants see their nobles getting annihilated, of course they will retreat. I mean, if you, and this is very strange. This is very typical of the 100 Years' War. If you read about the battles and you go to the end and see the casualties and see what happened, usually in these big battles that the French were supposedly annihilated, like Agincourt, Crécy, Poitiers, Verneuil, all these battles, the French who were retreating were still maybe triple the size of the English who remained. But the effect of panic, the morale, let's say the unorganized army created this effect. I mean, in Agincourt, the French were retreating and they were panicking. They were annihilated. There were at least 6, 7, 8,000 retreating, and the English were 5,000. So at those times, morale played a very important role, as in all armies, but especially as in all battles, in all eras, but especially at that period. You never had, one army annihilating the other, and then have, you have 5 remaining from one side and 3 remaining from the other side. The French armies were quite large when they were retreating, twice the English size, but the morale was the panic effect was, I think, something that, of course, played an important role. But generally speaking, I think the professionalism of the English army and the anarchy of the French army was the main reason of the French downfall at the beginning. Because between you and me, if you read books about arrows and about the effect of arrows, there was a weapons race at that time. There were masons. So there was still there were people who were fixing armor, and they were building the armor so it can withstand the arrow. So it was an armor race, and basically the longbow, it has never been proved that was actually piercing armor, was actually doing any major damage, except, of course, the mass longbow fire, that it's psychological, and of course, having been hit by hundreds of arrows, it's for sure you'll have some injury. But the actual effect as injury of the longbow, it's very much glorified. It was not that much. You know what I mean? It was not, it was not like you had arrows piercing the French and making them look like Greek souvlaki. You know what I mean? This didn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, it was mostly a psychological thing. Of course, when you see 20,000 arrows in the air, of course, some of the arrows will hit. Mostly, the arrows were hitting horses, and the horses were dying, and that's why the French started dismounting, because the horses were dying, the riders were falling down, the horses were trampling on the riders, the horses were running backwards, trampling on the other divisions coming up, and that's why the French, after the disaster at Crécy, started dismounting. But again, the anarchy of their army, I think, was the main reason that they lost many battles. And of course, the nobility's eagerness to fight and show that they were, they were brave, and they earned this, status.
Yeah, it's fought with too much honor and chivalry, maybe.
Exactly. That's it. They still had this type of fighting when the English already passed over this and were creating professional army. I don't know if I'm boring you guys, but I'll give you an example. In Agincourt, what happened? Why the French were annihilated, except the mistakes they did. In Agincourt, the English were deployed with the longbowmen on the flanks and the men-at-arms in the center. Now, the men-at-arms, the English had the knights with the banners of the, King Edward, King Henry V, and all his commanders with the banners were in the center. The French knights ignored the longbowmen. They didn't see any banners. For them, the longbowmen in the flanks were blanks, were non-entities, were non-targets. They couldn't see any banners. They couldn't see any heraldry. They couldn't see any English nobles, because, the banners were there to show where each noble was. So the French targeted the center, where you had King Henry V, when you had all his commanders, you have Warwick, you have all this, you had Salisbury, you had Talbot, you had all these major commanders in the center. And what they did, basically, they attacked the center. They ignored the longbowmen, and the longbowmen annihilated them. They flanked them. They killed them. When the French nobles were not expecting to be killed by these commoners. They were not, because they were surprised when King Henry V gave the order, and the longbowmen drew out their knives and their clubs, and they started massacring the French knights. It was, it's like it was like a revolution, something that, I mean, I don't know, something in another era militarily that was like a shock. It was like a shock to everybody. It was something out of the common practice. And what you said again is that the French delayed too much to get rid of this chivalric attitude, but the English much earlier, since 50, 60 years earlier, created professional armies that were trained, and they didn't care about banners, they didn't care about who is who, they cared only about winning the battle.
They also had a good chain of command, Nick. They obeyed orders. The French didn't. The French, it was all about being. They were cowards. They were very brave, but they were all in competition with each other who could get there first. So they didn't follow the command structure. They didn't follow their orders. Where the English did. If it was Henry V, whether it was Edward the Black Prince, whoever was in command gave the orders, and the battle commanders carried them out, and so did the men. And they didn't go charging off willy-nilly in bits and pieces. They did it in command, in total command and combined, which is what the French never seemed to be able to get a grip of. They always wanted to go charging ahead, and it was personal glory.
So what made the English give up that style of fighting, the chivalry? Was it just desperation over a period of time?
I think the watercolours had a lot to do with it. I mean, the previous experience had a lot to do with it. I think they simply learned the lessons from other battles. Yeah. And they just seemed to get it all right. I mean, they had this super weapon. They had the longbow, which originally was the Welsh longbow, but it became the English longbow. But they had this master weapon, this super weapon, and they just used it properly. And having a proper chain of command where the subordinates actually obeyed, whether or not they were a lord or a duke or whatever they were, they obeyed the chain of command, and they carried out their orders, where the French didn't. They would be piecemeal. They would go in. Anybody who saw a chance would go hurtling in.
That's interesting.
No, they just at the end they understood that they had to make professional armies, that they had to compete with the English. They were losing badly, and if you see after the major disasters, as I told you, the large number of the French force was basically a hindrance for them. They lost many battles because there were too many, and then after the major defeats, you saw the French armies being less. There were not more than 6,000-7,000 men or 5,000 men, when before there were 15, 18, 20,000. And many of the battles they lost also, except other reasons, of course, due to their large, unorganized and anarchic numbers. Many professional French armies, after the major losses for 1420s, after the victory in Orleans, where the French turned the tides, the French armies were small. They were not vast.
That's interesting. No.
They did learn the lessons, though, because I mean, by the time of the Sun King, around the Battle of Blenheim time, the War of the Spanish Succession, French armies dominated Europe. After the Revolution with Napoleon, once again the French armies dominated on land in Europe. So they did learn, and then they sort of regressed again when we came to the Second World War bit. They were clinging to old tactics with infantry mixed with tanks, which was slow, and like everybody else, they couldn't adapt to the Blitzkrieg and this lightning war that was suddenly unleashed upon them. So you've got another super weapon, and it takes time for nations and armies to adapt. counter it. But I mean, the French have always had huge military presence in Europe. I mean, even through the Middle Ages, even after the 100 Years' War, and it continued through right up through the 17th and 18th centuries.
No, it would be an interesting period to wargame.
But I was saying, Ian, before when you were away, that it's very funny that the successful dismounting tactics that the English employed and were the main reason of the major victories in the 100 Years' War were basically a copy-paste from the Scottish tactics that were very successful against the English. And I was saying to the guys here that how, generals, after defeats, good generals understand the quality or the better strategy of their opponents, and then they take them a step forward, a step extra, and they become successful. Because most of the tactics that the English used were the Scottish tactics during the Scottish Wars of Independence.
Yeah, of course, the Scottish, the English learned the lessons at Bannockburn and Stirling Bridge and used it to their advantage.
Ask the question is, where did the Scots get the idea, or who gave them the idea?
Well, they didn't have a choice. They didn't have any decent horses in Scotland. There was no decent horse breeding in Scotland. So, plus there wasn't much money around, so there weren't many nobles. So there was very few cavalry. Certainly, very few mounted men in armour. There was some, but not many. I mean, it was even the same right up to the era of the Jacobite Rebellion. The Scots were, it was the Highlanders, and it was basically a foot army. They had some cavalry, but again, the horse breeding in Scotland was really, it didn't really exist. So they couldn't match like what the English and French could purchase. The horse meat they could sit upon. So I think if you haven't got access to decent nags, you've got to adapt your tactics. So they tended to fight on foot.
That's fascinating, huh?
It's also the size of a country as well, because you're looking at taxes and taxation behind you. You've got a bigger population, so you've got a bigger percentage of males who were in fighting age. That was always the big advantage of England over Scotland. The population, I don't know how many times bigger it was than Scotland, but I would imagine it would be at least 4 times the size of Scotland, if not more. So you've got 4 times more taxation. You've got it's the little, it's the little brother against the big brother, really, and the little brother's very rarely. He might win the odd battle, but he's never going to win the war because he's just fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, war of attrition.
He just can't restock his ranks, and the industry, most of the industry would be in England, to make muskets, to make gunpowder, to make artillery. If you lose your troops, it's going to be damn hard to replace them with the English. It was a bit easier because they had a bigger populace, plus they would also be able to have the money to employ mercenaries, which they did. For instance, at Culloden, a lot of the troops who fought in Culloden were, I believe, German mercenaries on the English side.
Oh, do some more looking into this period. It's always been interesting. I've never really sort of studied it or really looked into it too deeply.
More distraction.
Yeah.
One thing I've learned is that you cannot, and you need to approach the hobby this way. You cannot do everything that interests you.
No,
You just can't.
No.
We love history. We love wargaming. This day and age, we see information about every conceivable conflict. That would be interesting. So would that. So would that. So would that. You just can't do it. You got to reason with yourself that, I can't do everything. These guys are talking a lot about medieval warfare. I'm steering clear of it. I know I can't do that too. I can't do it. I won't do it. I got a huge army of 15 mil, feudal English, and that's about as far as I'll peek into that doorway. Just too much. There's so many things that I want to do. Do them all.
I remember when I was one year, wee nipper, my auntie, she used to buy me these little metal pre-painted figures of medieval knights on horses, and they were probably some of the first figures I ever had. Yeah, little, they're about 25 mil, I think, something like that. Used to buy in a chain of shops in Plymouth. But they used to have them all pre-painted, and they're all glossy, and but that was some of my earliest figures. But it's always an interesting subject.
My figures there was a shop which isn't far from where I live now. It's still there. It's like a little department store, local, a northern Yorkshire area based firm. And my mother bought a wooden Fort Laramie from there, and each week she would go in and pay a few shillings off it, and she would buy a couple of plastic US cavalry and a couple of Indians, Native American Indians. Yeah. And so by the time Christmas came round, this fort was there with, I don't know, 40 or so cavalry and Indians. I would think they were about 54 millimeter. They were big. They were all pre-painted. Possibly Britons. I don't know if they were or not. I'm not sure. That was a fantastic thing. That was the first time I ever had any soldiers of my own, and I would be about 6, 7 years old then.
No, mine was medieval knights. Airfix Germans, and what was the other one? Gurkhas. I don't know what the other ones were.
Yeah, they came later for me.
Yeah.
They came later. We did buy them because you could buy them for 2 shillings a box.
Yeah.
Back then.
Box of all the Airfix, that was the old thing. Yeah. You started what?
Yeah, Nick, gotcha. I understand. You didn't record absolutely anything else. That's it.
No, this is exactly every detail we recorded together. Everything. I have all the characters. I don't think there is something missing. Unless there is. There was during this 10-second lapse I had while we were talking when I was in the Middle East. But this was exactly what we did. We changed the character and we changed some issues. So if there is anything, that doesn't look for you correct, we can work it again. But I think this was all, actually what we did.
I got a laugh out of the one stat there. You got a couple stats there that you wanted the best that you can possibly get, which is your height and your weight. And the height, you went 7 foot. Yes. 7 foot tall.
Well,
All right.
When you have, if you're 7 foot tall, how heavy is he?
When you there's some things in life that you're missing, so you need this.
I think you're 220 pounds.
Ooh, I should be skinny then at 7 foot.
220 pounds, 7 foot tall, 47 years old.
Yes. Well, okay.
That's a run to fat there then.
That's all fine. Hermit.
Linebacker.
But it's a great character. It's the background we came up with, which isn't on here, but it's great idea. You're going to have a lot of potential for some role playing if you're up to it.
Yeah, of course.
He's basically a paladin, which is a champion of goodness. In this setting, he's a champion of cores, which is one of the gods of sun and light and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty prominent in the area. But he's got a secret, and he battles internally with this. And it's one of the reasons why he's a paladin. And it's the fact that he's a Dhampir, which is half vampire, basically. His mother was human. His father was a vampire. The result of that is what's known as a Dhampir.
I'm a
And
bastard.
that's what he is. And it's a really interesting concept because they have a tendency to have evil about them. And he's a lawful good, which is, this guy don't lie. This guy don't kill unnecessarily. He's a lawful good. Goodest people you can get who's a Dhampir.
Yeah.
He's also concerned about the fact that he's really only 4 foot tall and he's wearing stilts.
I have complexes with height. What can we do, my friend? What we cannot achieve in real life, we have to make it up.
Yeah.
I'll still stick to being a smelly goblin with a personal hygiene problem.
Yes, why you chose your same self as in real life?
Because it was easy, and I don't have to do the accent. I can just be me. I can just sit here and hum.
I remember I think it was one chat. I think it was offline. We finished the online a bit, and it was, I don't know. I remember it was for sure Ian, Curtis, me. I don't know if it was anybody else. I think it was us three. And Ian was doing voices that he was going to use for the role playing. I could not stop laughing and crying after laughing. Seriously, you remember Ian?
Vaguely, yeah, I think I do, yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a few beers by then.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I remember.
Ah, yeah, of course.
I remember. I remember.
Yeah, I'll just stick to my Yorkshire accent. I get plenty of compliments on that.
Yeah, sure. For sure.
It's amazing how many people watch my videos and mention my voice and the accent. Which to me, when I listen back to it, I think, God, it sounds bloody awful. Somebody likes it.
No, Yorkshire accent is a classical accent now. True British accent.
It was always suppressed before, wasn't it? You know, when the BBC, everyone spoke with the proper Queen's English, and no one spoke with a local accent. But now you can, you get a Liverpudlian, you get a Yorkshire accent, you get a Newcastle accent. You know, where before it was taboo. No, people don't talk like that. Only very uncouth people up north speak like that.
Yeah, no, it's in the Welsh as well, and you hear that a lot now.
Yeah, you do.
Welsh accent, especially on the news channels.
No, it's not before time we had local accents from all around the country instead of just the plummy bloody London university voices.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Right, let me conclude our paint and chat, at least the live portion. I'm sure it's gone over an hour, maybe two.
Yeah, plus it could start getting nasty, you know.
Yeah, we're getting there.
We're getting to that point where we'll forget and start swearing.
So there you go, folks. That's our paint and chat. Short one. Well, not really. We'll be here the normal length of time. I just want to keep these a little bit shorter so they're easier to digest when it comes to watching. So there, it was interesting. Had a good little bunch of guys in tonight. We got Ian, the Nixter, and of course we got Andrew, who's usually on in every chat lately, which is great to see. Everybody's getting some painting done. I got a little extra done on my own little figures. If I can get the left right going here. Yeah, I got a little. I'm not going to play this game anymore.
It's not too bad. Yeah.
And I got 3 of these bases here done. With they're not done. I just painted the wood stocks on their weapons. I got all 3 of these medium bases done. And I got 3 more bases of the smaller. I got to do them. Got a Piat, man base, a 2-inch mortar. Not too much wood going on with those guys. But I'll finish that before I call it quits for the day. But our chat is about to conclude. I hope you enjoy. If you want to see more, let me know. Leave us some messages. And like I said before, the best way to join is to get into the Tabletop Commanders forum on Facebook. Join and keep your eyes open for links to join, or at least watch. You guys would be the first ones to see it before it hits YouTube. But I hope you enjoyed, folks. From everybody here, take care. We'll see you next time. Keep your eyes open. Take care, everybody.